We're going to go straight to the phones, and it's part of the discussion that we're talking about with sacks analytics and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to go to RJ in Phoenix, who wants to talk about analytics and sacks. RJ, you're on with Blaine and Zach.
What's going on, fellas, man? Thanks for what you guys do.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
So man, my wife's birthday was yesterday. So we was doing birthday stuff all weekend. I did not watch the game, right? So I looked at the stats after the game, and of course I heard all the shows and everything. Everybody's talking about we lost because of this, we lost because of that. But I wanted to call this show specifically because, Zach, you the numbers guy.
All right.
So if I'm looking at the numbers, just off the top, I saw we gave up 7 sacks. We didn't get a sack, right?
Right.
That's never going to be good.
No.
What stands out to me, we gave up a 56-yard kick return, right? This is with me. I didn't see a snap of the game. I'm just looking at the stats that I wrote down, right? We ran the ball 16 times. And we missed a field goal. Now, we lost by 10. A field goal makes it a one-possession game. And maybe you coach different when you need 1 score than 2 scores. But I'm looking at the stats. Levis had a good game. He threw 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He got sacked 7 times. I didn't watch it. I don't know if he held the ball too long. I don't know if the offensive line was terrible. That's why I'm calling to ask you guys. But looking at the stats, man, Levis did his thing. The defense gave up way too much. And the special teams is still terrible. So you tell me, why didn't we lose the game?
Yeah, RJ, I mean, sorry if I just hung up on you and you were going to continue. But RJ, I do agree. So here's where I'm at on. Let's take it one at a time. Sacks. What's interesting about this is kind of the one time the media, when it comes to sack Blaine, is kind of pretty much all right around the same spot. Some people say 3 sacks are attributed to Will Levis. Some say 4.5. I landed around the 4 mark for Will Levis, with a couple of those sharing the blame. And so, everybody's around 3 to 4. And that, to me, lets you know that, okay, we know that at least 3 are for sure on Will Levis. Let's do a little margin of error there, that the 4 is not the correct one, but the 3 is more than likely correct. The coach even said that at least 2 the day of the game, said 2 was on Will Levis. I think maybe there's a little bit more, because then he was like, he's not really going to play. He doesn't like playing the blame game on sacks. So that means that kind of lets me know that maybe a little bit more was on Will Levis after he watched film. Okay. The interesting thing to the special teams point was that the fact that Julius Wood goes down there, he trips over someone or his own feet or gets pushed, and he falls to the ground. He takes out one of his players. Then 2 LA players are taken down with each of them. And then you see 2 other players for the Titans are kind of having to adjust their pursuit angle because there was a big 4-car pile up. Right. And then there you go. There's and this team has such a thin margin of error in their coverage unit anyway. Their punt coverage unit was really good. And so there is sign of improvements. The defense, 0 sacks and giving up 7 sacks, no matter whose fault it is just untenable. It's hard to win a game like that. It's almost like turnover margin at that point.
Yeah. That's why I always laugh when we look at the stat numbers for where they're ranked.
Yeah.
Because there is no one that you fear as far as pass rusher. If Arden Key having a good day and Landry, which means, they're putting pressure on the quarterback and getting sacks, and they're really good players, but they're not elite players, and that teams have to game plan for. So it reminds me of when right before we had Javon Curse. We had a really good D-line, but he took us to a whole nother level. We need that player. We don't have that guy right now. And then that makes everything else so much easier. And just imagine now, I don't know if it's their number 1 in pass defense because their rush isn't doing so well, but man, just think how much better it would be, and let alone if we had the healthy 2 starting free agents that they signed. So defensively, they're just a solid team. We got to see a good defense in the Chargers there and what that really looks like. So I would say that about that. As far as the sacks with Levis, I would say I thought I was more at the 2.5 mark, closer to 3, but because one of them, I feel like he doesn't process the information. When he doesn't know where he's going to go and that 1 or 2nd read isn't there, he needs to say, okay, either I'm running or I'm throwing to my outlet.
Yeah.
Wherever that's at. He has to know that before he even steps backpedaling or gets the ball on a snap. Where is his outlet? And you should be able to throw that outlet pass, whether it's across the middle or to your right or to your left, with your eyes freaking closed. That's how easy it should be.
And you could see that he did it on some plays, but there were plays that he had maybe no pressure. I kind of thought when I went through and watched every one of his dropbacks on the all-20 team, I'm like, there's the progress, right? But we're not seeing the progress that I think that separates a starting level quarterback to an above average starting level quarterback is that ability to do it even when you have pressure coming.
Yes.
And that is, and listen, baby steps, I guess, at this point. And I guess we have to adjust our week to week expectations for Will Levis. They're not like, because I think everybody started off week one with the expectation, well, we saw what he was last year. That should be the ground floor this year. And maybe that's the right expectation to have for Will Levis. New system, brand new offensive line, new pieces.
I think maybe think that.
I think some people did. And I don't really think that was the wrong way to view it.
Well, I did.
But I mean, I think we have been a little bit more, I feel like our analysis week to week has been a little bit more fluid and setting the expectations properly. Because we had a big, long discussion about it last week, about what to expect if he starts and everything like that. I look at Will Levis, and I think sometimes he doesn't take off to run, and he still takes a sack, but technically that sack's on Dylan Radins for letting the guy in there. But again, everybody in the NFL kind of has this data point of 2.5 seconds. Not sure I agree of how long you should be able to hold up a block. And I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that, but I do think that if you get to a certain point as a quarterback, we talked about yesterday, the alarm bell should be going off. The signal should be going off. And I think with Will Levis, sometimes on that issue. And sometimes, listen, like we said, not every sack is on the quarterback. Not every sack is on Will Levis. There are times where these guys just let guys manhandle them. And I just want to bring it back real quick because I do have an interesting question about J.C. Latham. And it's not maybe just J.C. Latham. I've seen a couple of other players do it, but that remind me to ask you that later. So I want to go back to a study done by Jason Lisk in 2018 in a piece for The Big Lead, a sports website. And this is the conclusion that he did on sacks and the role that quarterbacks play on. Which brings us to sack rate. It is one of the most consistent things when a quarterback changes teams. It is one of the least consistent things when a team changes quarterbacks. So like I illustrated earlier, talking about the difference between Marcus and Tannehill or Fields and Wilson. Same team, different quarterbacks, and it's very inconsistent in how much it's varied from quarterback to quarterback. Again, and this tells me that the quarterback plays a larger role than people think in determining a team's sack rate. Now, this was 2018. I think this is a little bit more commonplace now in 2024, people thinking that, but I just want to throw that out there. Again, I don't know what exact percentage is attributable to the quarterbacks versus the line, and I certainly don't think the line is irrelevant in determining a quarterback taking hits. I just think we measure line play by the wrong stat if we focus solely on sack rate. Sack rate does seem to have a lot to do with the quarterback's style, decision-making, and willingness or unwillingness to gamble with a throw before they're ready. A quarterback with a tendency to take fewer sacks is going to get rid of the ball. It's his yards per attempt and completion percentage that are going to reflect whether the line did a good job. Was he throwing the ball when he wanted to or before he wanted to? And that's the ultimate conclusion. So
on time, right?
On time. And I think that is also the other thing with Mason Rudolph. He was allowing the offense to run on time. Levis did a better job at that this last week. I think he was horrible at that. I mean, just just rotten at being able to operate the offense on time. Now you got to sit on the sidelines, learn some things, saw some things, got to talk to Trevor Siemian on the sidelines during the game and all this kind of stuff.
But the coaches also help with that process with Mason Rudolph as they got better, and that means the head coach, of getting the plays in there, just how the whole structure of the offense was working. And it seemed as, because Will Levis wasn't out there, was it more of a collaborative effort from all people involved, and now they got that kind of down.
And I think that's what they kind of described, right? All last week, all we heard was we don't expect a considerable drop-off once we put Will Levis in because everybody got better. And to be honest, the only real thing that you saw a considerable drop-off in, and it's a big thing, is the sacks.
Right. Well, that's where I think your opponent matters.
Yes, I agree. I do agree. So I think that's an important asterisk for this particular conversation.
Yeah, not to say that he should have gave up, 7 sacks now, but if it was 5 or something, I don't know if we would even be having a conversation. But it was happenstance that he came back and they got sacked. So. Obviously, you can kind of go through that with a fine-tooth comb and say, okay, who was at fault here? Sometimes it's protection scheme. Sometimes they turn the protection the wrong way. Somebody's coming free. Somebody just gets beat individually. Sometimes the quarterback is drifting. Sometimes the quarterback does have pocket awareness and then moves into the sack instead of just run. Just run. So I think those are probably the issues more so of everything that we've seen about Levis, and I thought he played adequate, was his pocket awareness. And I don't know if he will ever be able to get over that.
Oh, that's
coming out here to me. There's just visually of all these things. He can kind of get better at some things during the season, but this one here is going to be interesting because I think it's just a habit that I don't know if he can break it within this short window of time that they're going to give him an opportunity to see if he can be a franchise quarterback.
Well, and I also think of this, and this is kind of another question that I also want to dive a little bit deeper in than what maybe time allows, is that the reps. The game slowing down with more reps. To be honest, his reps were inconsistent last year. He had about 8 full games of reps.
He started 6, right?
He started 8. He played 9, but started 8. If I'm not mistaken, because he didn't finish that Texans game. Right. And now we only have 3.5 and 5.5 this time. So he's really only had 13.5 games, to be honest with you, because the Miami game, he only played some. So it's real interesting to see, and he's not getting reps consistently. Some of that is because he got injured. He got injured last year. He got injured this year. So that's also something that you got to factor in with this evaluation, is whether he's dependable enough to be relied on to play the majority of a 17-game season. That's a big question mark, especially after you suffer through Jake Locker and Marcus. You suffer through these guys that can't play, that either get injuries too severe to play or won't play through injuries either, and the injuries just pile up. At some point, that has to factor in your evaluation of whether you keep Levis. But you talk about habits, and that's something that we've talked about Will Levis. The same stuff you're seeing in college, you're seeing now. It's hard to coach out the habits. And now we know that they're focusing on the habit, establishing good habits. He just hasn't really hit it on the ground going 100 miles an hour yet. And I think we saw some of the good habits rear their head this past Sunday that we haven't really seen in other games, including games last year. So we'll see. We'll see how that all works out. But going back to pressure to sack ratio, that the stats I was talking about in the first segment, Will Levis throughout his college career, includes his snaps at Penn State at quarterback and Kentucky, 25.3% of his pressures turn into sack. So far in his pro career, 24.9% of his pressures turn into sack. I'll take it one step further. Let's go to a guy like, who was I talking about earlier? Okay, a guy like Baker Mayfield. 20.3% in college. In the pros, we're looking at, and I just freaking lost it, 21.7 in the pros. So not a big difference. You go to a guy like Joe Burrow, 22.2 in college, 22.7 in the NFL. And this is I did them pulled up for everybody except for Aaron, the old heads that are in the league. I got them for everybody.
Okay, well, before you go on, how do you view from college talent, that you're going against quarterbacks, their little defenses, to the pros, because if it's somewhat the same as far as the percentage, you could honestly say that's an improvement. Do you disagree with that statement?
No, I don't disagree, but it's also the rate of your pressures turning into dropbacks regardless. You get what I'm saying? So, like, it seems like if you're a high sack, if you're a magnet for sacks, you're a magnet for sacks. You get what I'm saying?
Regardless. Doesn't matter who you play.
And I think that ultimately, like Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Herndon was on Buck Rising show, and Mike Herndon was talking about Ben Roethlisberger. And Ben Roethlisberger was a sack for magnets in college.
To the ball.
And he was a sack for magnets the first 6 seasons.
Mac action, Miami of Ohio.
You're right. And he was a sack for magnets in the pros for the first 6 years. And then he changed his playing style, changed his habit, changed all this stuff, and progressed. That can happen.
Let's wait.
Yeah.
Let's time out right there. What did you say?
He progressed. And he changed his habits and style. So it took 6 years. Yeah. You don't have the differences in his 6 years.
I'm going to cut that in half and go to 3.
Right.
And say, okay, in this day and age, how patient are you going to be?
Right.
Granted, it's a different era of time, but they gave him 6 years. So obviously they saw something in him. And because it was a big thing in the NFL, he would hold on to the ball because he was so big and he would get hit. And it was like they were falling off of him. It didn't matter.
He was a big boy.
Right. So you had to hit him with a lot of funk in your trunk there, man. But so I just want to talk about patience. I don't know if Will Levis ever can get over all these little things that can make you a really good starting, consistent quarterback in the National Football League. I sure hope he can, but how patient will we be? Do we just give him this season?
Yeah.
And that's it, even if he starts showing you a glimpse of, like, because what you're also thinking about is the quarterback, where are you getting him from? If it's from the draft, that haven't had a lot of success with the organization that way, or are you getting him in the middle of the road, some stopgap quarterback, which they've had much more success at? I'm going to go Tannehill, Kerry Collins. We can go down the list. Hasselback. Are you going to go down that road and then maybe still even draft a quarterback and then patiently involve them in whatever you're doing over a couple years' time? So I don't know which way is best. But you also have to look at history and don't let history scar you based off who's coming out, though. You got to say, what are the likelihood of these guys being successful?
Okay, so I'm gonna leave you with something, and then we're gonna go to Tommy in Murfreesboro. And I want you to think about this while we're talking to Tommy. I think, and see what you think about this. I think the chances of Will Levis being a bridge quarterback for 2025 is much, much larger than Will Levis being a franchise quarterback beyond 2025. I'm going to get your thoughts on that.
I'm with you on that, though. I'm with you on that.
Okay, we're going to go to Tommy in Murfreesboro who wants to talk about Will Levis, because everybody does. Tommy, you're on with Blaine and Zach.
Thanks, Zach. I think Levis progressed some on Sunday, but the one play that you had talked about yesterday that just is something that a freshman in college should be able to make this read was in the second half on first down where he sprinted out and took the sack when his number one receiver was wide open down the field. And he not only didn't see the receiver for some reason, then he comes back and he takes a 5-yard penalty for delay of game right after that. So that's not something that he should be making as a second year or third year pro in NFL. That's something that he should be able to do when he's a freshman in college. And just those silly mistakes to me are just what really is intriguing by whether or not he's going to be able to be successful or not. And I was wanting to know if you can tell me how many college starts that Will had, because Mr. Irrelevant out in San Francisco, you know how many college starts he had? It's like in the 40s.
Right, yeah.
And so I don't know if that has something to do with it or not, but I'm sure it probably does. So I'll hang up and listen. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the college starts matter. There's varying degrees of how much they do matter and everything for the quarterbacks and everything. Will Levis, if you'll just give me a second to find it.
He started 20-some games?
Yeah, Will, because he never started for
Penn State, did he?
For Penn State.
He played in some games where they had him running. I have a Penn State alum.
It was like 20-something games. It was below. It was below the margin of what you typically want to see from a quarterback.
You went over it. Yeah,
I think it was Daniel Jeremiah and them. They wanted 29.5.
Oh,
and really, to be honest with you, Bill Parcells wants you to be a 3-year starter, start 30 games, and win 23 of those games. Like to win 23 games as a starter. So Will Levis didn't hit any of those, marks. So it's just, to me, I think that all plays into it.
Yeah, what did you think about on the Wiley play? Because I know we've talked about it. Is that the play we were talking about?
I think that's the play I was talking about. I'm not entirely sure. That's the only play I really talked about. I didn't really say anything about Calvin Ridley yesterday. So
that was a deeper pass on Wiley, correct?
Yeah. And the NWI was right in front of Wiley doing the same thing, about 7 or 8 yards, and they were both kind of open. So he had two options.
I felt like he should have hit NWI. Only reason why I say that, when you start scrambling around, things are moving a lot faster. Yes. And I think that's what Will Levis is saying. A guy is open when you initially release it. So the deeper you throw the ball down, the faster the guys are going to react. And so that guy, you got to see when he gets hit, that guy is standing right next to Wiley at that time, by the way, and the ball wouldn't have got there at the time. So a lot of times we could say, oh, this guy's open. Well, when you start scrambling around, he can't see all the pieces to the puzzle of the players who are moving in, who are closing in on these guys. So I think that was a safer play, but I would have gone to NWI there.
I would have too.
Mm-hmm. And then the delay of game I thought it was more from the sideline.
It's more the center, from what I understand.
He should have snapped it.
Yeah.
He got to know too. But,
right.
I mean, they shouldn't have got out there on the line that late.
So when we come back, we'll talk more about Will Levis, the offensive line, a couple of other details I want to clean up. We'll also have Coach Mack in hour number 2 for his usual weekly Mack Attack, brought to you by Two Rivers Ford, South's most trusted Ford dealer. I'm Zach. He's Blaine. This is Cover 2 on 104.5 The Zone.